Safe Space Cafe. News, music, and comedy.
Yes, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you. My question is for Mr. Ulicki. Good timing being here. The government tells us it wants to charge taxpayers $9 billion for daycares. They believe that that the best way to provide daycare is to take money from parents, bring it up to the federal government, which will give it to the provincial government, which will give it to the municipal government, which will give it to agencies that deliver daycare spaces. You had another idea, which was just to build a daycare. and provide 80 kids with a place to go and be cared for. Now, of course, the obstacles you faced were municipal, but those same municipal leaders are constantly asking for federal tax dollars, and that's why they've elevated this to the federal level. I note that there were roughly 80 millionaires who stood up and opposed your proposed daycare, and you were going to provide 80 daycare spaces. So you had 1 millionaire for every child, one millionaire blocking every kid from having a daycare space. It was quite an interesting ratio. And one of those privileged elites, of course, was Tiff Macklem, the head of the Bank of Canada, who's been a big rhetorical supporter of government daycares. And yet he and his family objected, that saying that your daycare would have taken away the charm of the neighborhood. And it would even have required garbage trucks to come and pick up the waste that would be produced by the daycare. I don't know who picks up their garbage. Perhaps Mr. Macklem could testify about how he disposes of his waste. But how much money did you have to spend on government already in your efforts to provide these 80 kids with a daycare space?
Well, the question is not how much have I spent on government, because the spend on government is with respect to paying for permits, etc. The primary cost is the carrying cost of having a building sit vacant for now effectively 5 years. So that includes interest, heat, light, and power, property taxes, utilities, insurance, etc. And those costs are approximately $100,000 per year. And may I point out, because it's a project that you're developing, as per our wonderful CRA, I do not have the ability to deduct those costs. I actually have to capitalize them. So I, in fact, have to make $200,000 in order to have $100,000, because I pay in after-tax dollars, and I get to capitalize it. And then once it's completed, if it's completed, I get to deduct it at, it's 4% per year is the deduction. So basically, all these carrying costs, etc., I get to deduct at 4% per year into infinity.
Wow. And so you've already wasted $500,000 on delays.
Yes.
And you began this process in 2017. So now
Correct.
we're going on 5 years of waiting. And do you expect that daycare will open anytime soon?
I think you have to ask the City of Toronto. It's up to City Council to decide whether or not they want to support what you call PUDO, which is pick up and drop off. So it's not uncommon in the City of Toronto to allocate public parking spots for pick up and drop off for children. They do it for daycares, they do it for schools. And you have to pass a specific municipal bylaw in order to authorize that. And that's the primary impediment that we've had here, because the neighbors do not want to have those spots given up to pick up and drop off, because it would impede their ability to park in front of their house in downtown Toronto.
Right. So they want the spaces for themselves instead of for the kids.
Absolutely.
We'll see. Ms. Freeland might be very concerned about this, because she says she's going to create all of these new daycares with her $9 billion a year taxpayer-funded plan. I don't know if she'll be able to get them approved by city councils if we have the same experience as you've had. I have a hard time understanding why someone like you would go through all of this torment. You're obviously a successful businessman. You've devoted almost a half decade of your life and $500,000 of your dollars to trying to do something good for 80 kids, and all you've had is a bunch of gatekeepers, self-serving gatekeepers, protecting their own backyards, One of them actually complained that the danger was that there would be kids making too much noise.
Yeah.
Next to her house. She signed her submission to the city with PhD. So I gather she's busy thinking big thoughts in her house while she doesn't want to be interrupted by little munchkins running by, singing songs, and skipping their way to the park. But that's how crazy it's got in this country. And one day, I hope that people rise up, consumers, workers, and entrepreneurs like you, against this gatekeeper economy. Thank you for telling your story and for persisting through all of this bureaucracy. Madam Chair, how much time do I have left? Madam Chair?
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Mr. Donnell, you told us last time that if someone came here as an immigrant from Germany who'd been working for Lufthansa but had the capacity to maintain Air Canada planes in Germany, they wouldn't actually be able to do the same work in Canada because their credentials can't be recognized. Even if they're capable of doing exactly the same work, they cannot get a license to practice. Is that true? And can you expound upon that gatekeeping in our labor market?
Yes, that is true.
Very quickly,
Subject
Mr.
to the
Donnell.
Chair. Yes, it is true, Mr. Poilievre, and it's because Transport Canada doesn't recognize the academic training that individual took, regardless of their competency. So if Transport Canada funded the development of a competency-based assessment system, that problem would go away.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, the third wave of COVID-19 is ravaging Canada. We are in this situation because the federal government didn't secure enough supply of vaccines fast enough to prevent it. Today, the government of Manitoba had to secure help from North Dakota to vaccinate essential workers. How many Canadians will have to be vaccinated in the United States because of this Prime Minister's failure to secure vaccines?
Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's important in this House that we be grounded in facts. Our plan is working, and we're getting more vaccines than anticipated. We've now delivered over 13.3 million doses to provinces and territories, with more than 10 million doses of vaccine already having been administered. Thanks to the tireless work of officials to accelerate vaccine deliveries, we are now in the top 3 of G7 and G20 countries.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His plan is working. Moderna delayed and doses reduced. AstraZeneca delayed and doses reduced. This morning, production of the J&J vaccine has been suspended at main facility. Supply shortages, Mr. Speaker, will only get worse as more Canadians become eligible for shots. Why did this Prime Minister fail to secure the required vaccines months ago?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives attempted to play politics with this, but the fact is we actually passed our target of 6 million doses by the end of March by over 50%. And we're now receiving over 1 million doses every single week, and we will continue to. 2 million doses in the month of May every week, and up to 48 million, more than 48 million doses by the end of June. Every Canadian who wants to be vaccinated will be fully vaccinated by September. Mr. Speaker, we are on track.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We are in the third wave of this pandemic, so severe because of his failure, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, to secure vaccines at a rate the United States was months ago. Exceeding targets by stealing vaccines from the developed world is shameful leadership by this Prime Minister. He announces future shots months from now, the same press conferences he announces delays for the next few weeks. The provinces are desperate for more vaccine supply. Where is it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will be receiving more than 1 million vaccines every single week for the foreseeable future, with 2 million in the month of May, with tens of millions in the month of June. We will continue to deliver vaccines, but we know that as we continue to work, we need to make sure we're following public health guidelines and basing our decisions on science, which is something this government has always done. We will continue to work with provinces and territories, and Canadians will notice, even if Conservatives don't want to talk about it, we put forward a budget that gives so much help to Canadians that Conservatives don't even have any questions on it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister.
Investigate allegations. It is.
Congratulations to India for announcing all its adults will be eligible for a vaccine as of May 1st. While Canada's government has not domestically produced a single dose of COVID vaccine, India has been vaccinating its population with its own vaccines produced within their borders, while also manufacturing vaccines for Canada. Why didn't the Minister of Procurement secure a partnership with India, a large democracy and one of the largest vaccine-producing nations in the world, to develop and manufacture vaccines in Canada in early 2020?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. Mr. Speaker, we made historic investments in biomanufacturing in Canada. I'm sure the member will remember Medicago. She will remember Vido in Saskatchewan. She will remember Abcelera in Vancouver, Precision Nanosystem. In fact, Mr. Speaker, 12 days after the World Health Organization declared pandemic, we were already investing to 100 million. Within 30 days, we added another 600 million. So it's about $1 billion since the World Health Organization declared pandemic. Mr. Speaker, we made a historic investment, and we will continue to invest to ensure the safety of all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Well, I'm sure the minister will remember that the federal Liberals didn't attempt to partner with India, but they did with the government of China. Last year, the federal Liberals negotiated vaccine development with a company owned by the Chinese government, with whom Canada has many high-profile ongoing concerns, who then unsurprisingly canceled the deal after stringing the federal Liberals along for months. So why did the federal Liberals engage in a doomed vaccine production deal with the government of China, as opposed to securing one with our allies in India, the largest democracy in the world?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the narrative that is being propagated on the other side of this House is patently false. We secured 7 bilateral APAs with leading manufacturers.
I'm going to interrupt the Honourable Minister. We seem to have had a little bit of a technical glitch. If I can get her to just start right from the beginning, and we'll just set back the clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The argument from the opposition in that question is patently false. We have 7 APAs with leading vaccine manufacturers, positioning Canada to be one of the leading procurement bodies and countries in the world. Let us just remember the facts, Mr. Speaker. 13.4 million doses distributed across this country already. 10.2 million Canadians have had at least 1 dose of vaccine. That's 24% of Canadians with 1 dose of vaccine. We are resting at number 2 in the G20 for doses administered per 100 people, Mr. Speaker. We will continue delivering for Canadians now and until all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The fact is that Canada has not produced a single domestically produced dose of vaccine. By now, we should be producing enough vaccine to supply our own populations like the Americans and Brits have. Instead, the federal Liberals have failed and put countries like India, who are facing a 3rd wave, in an impossible situation, sending a G7 country vaccines despite needing to vaccinate their own countrymen. The federal Liberals are also raiding vaccine supply meant for the developing world through COVAX. Imagine if we had had a manufacturing partnership with India. How many lives could have been saved if the Prime Minister had secured a domestic manufacturing partnership with India last year?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member. I would say, Madam, Mr. Speaker, just imagine that we have a partner to manufacture vaccine in Canada. It's called Novavax, Mr. Speaker, which has chosen Canada of all the jurisdiction where they operate. And more interesting, Mr. Speaker, we have also a domestic company called Medicago, in which we invested $173 million to make sure that we'd have a made in Canada vaccine, Mr. Speaker. And in addition to that, yesterday the Minister of Finance added another $2 billion to make sure that we'll continue to invest in manufacturing. We will continue to invest in the health and safety of all Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
You have 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Donnell, we bring 300,000 immigrants to Canada every year. On average, they tend to be more educated than the Canadian-born population, more likely to have master's and PhD degrees, yet less likely to work in the fields for which they were trained. We also have veterans who leave the armed forces with immense skills, but not licensed qualifications. So they do all kinds of trades work on military equipment and then don't have, for example, licensing to do work as mechanics or other tradespeople. And then finally, we have other people who pick up skills throughout their lives that are very real. Farm kids are the best possible example. They learn how to work on all kinds of equipment. They're obviously qualified. They've been these extremely complicated mechanical apparatuses operate on their farms. And yet, if they ever leave the farm and try to get into these trades, they're not licensed. And the licensing in this country is based on, as you say, hours and hoop jumping, rather than on what people can actually do. I give you the example of a constituent of mine, came here to work as a heart surgeon. He'd been doing heart surgeries in Singapore, a country that's more advanced than Canada. And he got licensed by the College of Physicians. But guess what? Immigration Canada wouldn't give him a work permit because they had not independently done a forensic analysis of his life. The College of Physicians thought he was qualified. The Singaporeans thought he was qualified. And I might add that the human heart in Singapore is biologically the same as the heart here in Canada. They almost stripped him of his work permit, and he was ready to go home because, frankly, he can get a job anywhere in the world. Thank God we intervened and got him his practice back, and there are probably hundreds of Ottawa residents whose lives have been saved by him since. What do you suggest we do across the entire system to remove this gatekeeping, this bureaucratic gatekeeping that prevents people who can demonstrate they have the skill set to do the job from getting licensed to do it?
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre, and I agree with you that it is a travesty that we have these dramatic skill shortages that are preventing Canadian companies from being competitive and turning away work because we don't have the workforce to do it. All of those examples you gave, foreign workers who are licensed in their home jurisdiction in our industry, come here. 99% of those requests are refused by Transport Canada, as I alluded to earlier, not because of lack of competence, but because they didn't study the same academic program.
So they can do all the same things.
Absolutely. They've been doing it for 20 years on Air Canada aircraft.
So let me be clear just here. I sorry to interrupt, but they've been working on Air Canada aircraft in other places, landing stations in, for example, Germany, but then they come here and they can't work on the very same aircraft that they were working on abroad. Do I understand you correctly? Okay.
Vous avez tout compris. That's exactly right. And because they didn't study, for example, cloth wings back in Berlin, so now they have to do a gap training on cloth wings, but they can't do that at a Canadian college. Just that little piece. Colleges aren't set up for that. So they have to go back for 2 years to study, and they can't afford to do that, quit their job and go back to school for 2 years.
So they come here with this extremely valuable brain that is worth probably millions of dollars to our economy, but they're banned from using it.
Correct.
Wow, that is again an example of this gatekeeper economy we've built in this country, where we prevent people from contributing and succeeding. Think of all the tax revenues they could be paying if their incomes were what they are worth, what they should be paid. And think of all of the jobs we would have, and think of all of the services our economy could enjoy if we did what you're suggesting, which is judge people based on what they can do.
Competency assessment, not following a checklist in a book. And those tools exist for competency assessment in our industry. University of Waterloo is doing some great things. We have some competency assessment tools, but we need to move to that and move away from hours-based training in our colleges, providing industry the tools. And if they have the foreign workforce and the military, as you alluded to,
we know how to do it.
It'll increase our competitiveness.
British Columbia's top trade school did attempt at this, where they gave course credit to soldiers based on the skill sets those soldiers had already developed. So I'll wrap up on that point, Madam Chair. Our trade schools know how to do this. Let's get busy, recognize skills, and get people to work. Get the gatekeepers out of the way.
Thank you very much, MP Poilievre.
Don't forget to like, dislike, subscribe, and comment. Safe Space Cafe. And always, have a good day.